Hoje eu vou contar um pouco a história do nosso Portal da Luz. O início desse portal, ele tem uma história do idealizador desse projeto, que é o Senhor Divino João Cavion e sua esposa, Eulália Casagrande Cavion, e moravam afastados, onde não tinha hospital, não tinha nada, e o irmão dele, de 7 irmãos, ele era o mais velho, e esse irmão veio a falecer sem conseguir assistência médica, porque eles não tinham como levá-lo a um hospital, e ele acabou sofrendo muito essa dor de ver aquele irmão sofrer sem ajuda e sem condições. Então ele se fez um juramento, que quando ele ficasse mais velho e que ele tivesse condições de ajudar, ele iria então fazer uma instituição para atender pessoas carentes, como ele foi. Para fazer esse projeto todo, é óbvio que precisavam pessoas para vir se juntar a ele. E aí então ele idealizou na cabeça dele de fazer então, além do Centro Espírita, que foi a nossa primeira construção, o nosso início, ele também tinha a ideia de fazer um centro, então uma escolinha para as crianças, como começou a escolinha Nosso Lar, hoje Centro Assistencial Portal da Luz, A primeira casa foi o Centro Espírita Portal da Luz, depois a segunda foi a nossa escolinha, depois foi feito então o centro de eventos, que está até hoje, sendo um grande auxiliar para podermos então manter a instituição.
Meu nome é Isabel, eu coordeno o Serviço de Convivência e Fortalecimento de Vínculos aqui no Portal da Luz, no qual atendemos 80 crianças como meta, dentro do nosso projeto.
Meu nome é Irene, trabalho há 17 anos no Centro Assistencial Portal da Luz e é muito bom e gratificante servir eles.
Eu sou a Marilei, sou assistente social aqui do Portal da Luz. A relação que eu tenho com as crianças aqui é de muito amor. Então, para nós, isso é muito gratificante. Quando a gente sabe que a gente conseguiu mudar, transformar alguma coisa, esse é o nosso trabalho, é por isso que a gente está aqui, por eles.
E a gente vem aqui trabalhar por amor, a gente se dedica porque a gente gosta daquilo que a gente faz e se sente feliz de poder colaborar um pouquinho no meio de tanta situação dramática como nós estamos presenciando hoje. E que Deus abençoe toda essa família Portal da Luz, todas as pessoas que por aqui passaram. Foram muitas que deixaram o seu legado. Um abraço a todos e continue prestigiando o Portal da Luz. Venham nos conhecer, venham conhecer o trabalho.
Studying the Spirits Book. A sequential study of Allan Kardec's work, The Spirits Book. This is our way of transmitting hope, knowledge, and joy. Hello, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be reunited. Every Monday at 8 p.m. Welcome, dear Internet users. To Carlos, the sign language interpreters, Veronica Lima, from Rio de Janeiro, with an extensive curriculum that includes coordinating studies of the Spiritist doctrine for Conceb, for groups of deaf and bilingual hearing people, Portuguese and Libras, and Andrea Beatriz, our other interpreter from the Federal District. And the guests, Jose Alberto Machado, who was president of the Allan Kardec Foundation Manaus and coordinator of the production of systematized study guides for the Gospel according to Spiritism and the New Testament, among other activities. Currently, he leads in-depth study groups on the Spiritist doctrine and the Gospel of Jesus. Zé Alberto, welcome to this journey, and from the outset, I place my heart and mind at your disposal for this meeting. Today we also have with us Otaciro Rangel Nascimento, who holds a doctorate in physics, is a professor at the Physics Institute of USP, São Carlos, a Spiritist speaker, and a member of the Spiritist Society Obreiros do Bem. Our fraternal greetings to all of you who are joining us, to Chris, our interpreters for Libras, Jose Alberto and Otaciro, our compliments, my brother. Thank you, Carlos. It is a pleasure to be with you, with Christina, Andrea, and Jose, in this wonderful opportunity to continue the efforts of the Spirit of Truth, who, together with Allan Kardec, this missionary of good, was able to build the structure of the Spiritist doctrine upon this fantastic book, which is the Spirit's book. Very well. In the previous study, we began analyzing question 27 from the Spirit's book, in which Allan Kardec asks, "Are there then two general elements of the universe, matter and spirit?" Julio Cesar Goa, who was with us, made an excellent comment, but it wasn't possible to hear from the other two interviewees. Jose Alberto and Otaciro are here with us today, so we asked them both to please comment on this question, because it is fundamental to understanding Spiritist philosophy and deserves our attention. Well, we'll start with the younger ones, Otaciro, because he can cover the subject thoroughly, and I'll stay quieter, you know? You don't know anything. I'm 77 years old. Very well, but it will be a pleasure. In my view, question 27 is one of the pillars of this first part of the Spirit's book, because the Spirits, responding to Kardec, who asks a very intelligent question, show that our universe is structured with three things, from the point of view of spiritual reality. God, the Creator, the inexhaustible intelligent source of the universe, the spiritual principle, which gives rise to intelligent life, and the material principle, which provides the structure of the universe as a resource for the manifestation and instrumentality of the development of intelligences. Which are the intelligent principles. So our universe is structured with three pillars: God, spirit, and matter. However, in this question, the Spirits take the opportunity to introduce a seemingly new concept, but one that was, in fact, already suspected by scientists, by the geniuses who studied nature. In Kardec's time, there was a concept of ether, a kind of substance on which everything rested, that filled the entire universe. The development of science showed that this ether, as it was thought, as a very subtle matter, did not exist, did it? It was superseded by scientific experiments that attempted to measure its properties. It was thought to have certain properties, but was not found. However, this idea was later replaced by others, such as the idea of a field, given by the vision of force fields that manifest themselves independently of distance. But the Spirits call this fundamental substance universal cosmic fluid. And then, in Kardec's concept at the time when science was known, he tried to position this fluid between the spirit, which was almost an abstraction, and matter, which is palpable. When Kardec asked what matter is, back then, comparing it to what is palpable, perceived, and occupies space, the idea was of gross matter. Although we know that air is also material, he didn't yet have a very clear perception of what constituted it, because the development of the structure of the ideas of atoms was emerging in that period. So the Spirits give an answer in question 27 that is very important because he introduces ideas phrase by phrase. He says that this material fluid, this universal fluid, plays the role of intermediary between spirit and matter proper. Here, the word proper, the phrase properly speaking, has a meaning, because that was the view of matter that we had, which the Spirits respect as knowledge already acquired by human science. But then he says, right, that this matter proper is too coarse for the Spirit to act upon it. So you see, he's talking about coarse matter that offends our senses of touch and sight, right? Especially those that are very solid. Then he adds, although from a certain point of view it is correct to classify it as a material element, it is distinguished from it by special properties. Look, today we have the concept of electromagnetic energy. Electromagnetic energy in states of high intensity, in very intense electromagnetic fields, can produce pairs of material particles, such as an electron and a positron, a proton, an antiproton, a neutron, and antineutron. It doesn't matter whether it's matter or antimatter. Matter and antimatter are two things that are, from a material point of view, identical. The difference between matter and antimatter is the difference in charge. Matter is made of charged electrons and positive protons. Antimatter is made of positive electrons and negative protons, right? But it's the same matter interacting, that is, a negative electron interacting with a positive electron. This interaction causes the electron and the positron to disappear, an electron and the anti-electron to disappear. And electromagnetic energy is released, 2 photons. So energy transforms into matter, and matter transforms into energy. But energy was not well understood in Kardec's time. So the Spirits are gradually bringing the idea closer for us to arrive at this concept of energy, which is very important for us to understand. If the universal fluid were positively matter, there would be no reason why the Spirit should not also be. This means that the Spirit, the intelligent principle, is clothed in this subtle energy, and it always presents itself with it, so that the Spirit is not an abstraction, it is a reality, but it is a reality not perceived by our senses. There would be no reason for it not to exist, right? Therefore, so that the Spirit would not exist. And then it affirms again, it is placed between spirit and matter. What is placed between spirit and matter? It is energy, which was not known at the time. It is fluid like matter and susceptible, through its countless combinations with it and under the action of the Spirit, to producing the infinite variety of things of which you only know a tiny part. Look at that incredible thing. And today we know this. You take, for example, an ice cube, you give it energy, it heats up and turns into water. You continue giving it energy, it vaporizes. You continue giving it energy, it separates the water molecules and dilutes this material. But if you continue giving it a lot more energy, the water molecules dissociate into oxygen and hydrogen. So it's a matter of associations with energy, isn't it? So it's interesting to see that. This primitive or elemental universal fluid, being the agent that the spirit uses, is the principle without which matter would be in a perpetual state of division and would never acquire the qualities that gravity gives it. Now that's exactly what we see in the nucleus of the atom. It's aggregated. If you disturb this energetic state of the atom, it explodes and forms an atomic bomb. Right? It produces a lot of energy, it releases energy. Now we're going to see another issue later on that says this universal fluid is imponderable, it's not easily measured, but we have the same difficulty with energy. We don't measure energy, we measure energy differences. Look how interesting. So, this universal fluid is a kind of primitive energy created by God, called by André Louis the divine ostro or nervous fluid of the Creator, which interpenetrates everything in creation. And the intelligent principle aggregates this fluid around it as a force field that attracts meshes, for example, with a magnetic field that attracts iron meshes, and structures the first expression of interaction between the intelligent principle and the material principle to begin the life process. So it's not difficult for us to understand this, but we have to learn to think with the concepts that science has already given us, which Kardec didn't have at the time. So this question is very beautiful because it structures the universe and allows us to understand that this cosmic fluid is sensitive to the psycho-emotional field of the spirit. So the spirit influences the cosmic fluid, and through the cosmic fluid organizes itself to influence gross matter. Perfect. This question 27 is really a basic question, right, for understanding, including concepts that will be unfolded later throughout the entire Book of Spirits, right, in this first understanding of the basis of Spiritist understanding. And still focusing on question 27, Claudia Danz here in the chat brings us a contribution. Actually, it's a question, Jose Alberto, that I would like you to comment on within your comment on question 27. Can we translate universal fluid as energy? And if so, just as we have different types of energy, can we have a variant of fluids? First of all, Odicirio presented the summary of his doctoral thesis, right? Tessir gave a lecture on, I would even skip it, because he even commented on the issue of energy. However, since question 27 is under discussion here, it's worthwhile, I'm going to give it another focus, although considering the same aspects, right? Because the question is implicit there. Is the universe unitary or dualistic? Is it monistic or dualistic? Does it have a single initial element? Or in fact, from the beginning, are there always two elements in the universe, right? And I must say from the outset that Kardec, in his comments on this question, actually at the end of that session, said that it is possible for them to exist, but we don't know where they come together. But the spirits, in answering the question, he says, look, in fact, why does Kardec ask about a certain thing? Are there two elements? The spirits say, look, above all, there is God. However, as Tessirio said, introduce another element, the universal fluid. So therefore, it's not two elements that the spirits are saying, look, there is another one, this third one, that would possibly be the unitary one. And the spirits themselves open the question, saying exactly as Tessirio said, although from a certain point of view one could call it matter, also the reason why the spirit is not also that. That is, he takes the question to say, look, in the beginning of things, there is this fluid that somehow undergoes the necessary transformations. However, this is a question that is open for our studies. I just want to reiterate, as I said last week, Emmanuel's contribution to this issue. Emmanuel raises a question in his book. When asked about this, he was asked, is it permissible to consider spirit and matter? We speak here of spirit as a spiritual principle, and matter also as a material principle, as two allotropic states of a single primordial element of matter, in order to achieve reconciliation. In order to achieve reconciliation of the two schools, perpetually in dualistic, immunological struggle, arriving at a unitary conception of the universe. And I think that's where the issue lies, the unitary dualistic conception. And Emmanuel makes it very clear that it is permissible to consider the principle of matter, spirit and matter, understood here as spiritual principle and material principle, as different states of the same immutable essence, possibly this universal cosmic fluid, thus establishing the substantial unity of the universe. Within this physical psychic monism, perfectly compatible with dualistic doctrine, it is necessary to consider matter as a negative state, and spirit as a positive state of that substance. We have not yet found the point of integration of these two elements, closely united on all planes of our relative knowledge. So as Kardec says, look, there are opinions about this as a unitary conception, but we are unaware of it. What we see now is a material expression, an expression with intelligence, right? So, it's a question that will continue to require our reflections. I remember that last week, Carlos Campete added similar observations given by Leonque, which also goes in the same direction, and André Louis himself, in several of his works, but particularly in Evolution in Two Worlds, also proposes similar perceptions, in such a way that science is advancing and showing us important aspects. Oh, this week you see, Tarsier? I know that you, who follow things more closely than all of us, I saw two very interesting news items that, when I read them, made me think of you, and remembered that you would, in some way, comment on them with us, or not. First, a news item with the following title: Subatomic particles seen oscillating between matter and antimatter. Imagine what that is, right? A subatomic particle, one of the ions, or carbons, right? Oscillating between matter and antimatter. And the other headline in the same field saying the following: Experiment makes the quantum leap of the electron visible to the naked eye. That is, this leap that the electron makes from one orbit to another, the moment in which it generates the photon, was seen with the naked eye. Naked eye, naturally, using the full extent of the eye with super-electron microscopes, etc., etc. So you see, we're having difficulties perceiving things in our senses. We're creating mechanisms to see. This state is quite distant from what Kardec's time considered matter, right? So, therefore, those are the considerations. Very well. Tessiro, I'm going to ask you one. Your microphone is off, Tessiro. Ah, yes. I didn't turn it off. I'd like to make a small addition, because we need to reconcile this question and answer from the Spirit's book with the question that Kardec also asks: what definition can you give of matter? Hint. And look at the definition. Matter is the bond that binds the spirit. It is an instrument that the spirit uses and upon which, at the same time, it exerts its action. So in this monistic or dualistic principle, what matters to us and what is practical for us to think about is that we can conceive, through thought, the spirit detached from matter, and matter detached from the spirit. The spirit will always present itself clothed in matter, in order to manifest itself, and simultaneously act upon the environment in which it is embedded. If it is a backward spirit, it does this with gross matter. If it is an advanced angelic spirit, it does so with a paraspiritual body, which is a special matter, a modification of the universal cosmic fluid under very special circumstances. In any case, matter is the participant, the coadjuvant of spiritual reality. Therefore, we don't need to think about separating them, but we need to understand them as two aspects of nature created by God that always present themselves together. Very well, we will continue studying this further. We will delve deeper into it in the future. I just want to welcome you here. Teresa Cristina Alianza says, I am deaf, from the state of Sao Paulo. Good evening. Welcome to all our deaf brothers and sisters who are following our study. It is a great pleasure, and God willing, next week we will also begin to provide audio description. Is that all right? We still have a question from Mona Lisa and Cortazio. This energy that is between spirit and matter is what Kardec later calls the paraspirit. We will study the paraspirit later, but briefly explain it to us. In truth, we don't know what spirit properly is, and strictly speaking, we still don't know what matter properly is. We have many difficulties understanding these concepts because they are not yet very tangible to our senses. So what we can say is that the spirit is a kind of psycho-emotional force field that gathers around it the energetic principle, which we call universal fluid, to express itself and act, right? So we still don't know what the universal fluid is, what it's made of. In fact, we don't know a lot of things. Jose talked about this oscillation between matter and antimatter, which means a fluctuation in the sign of the electric charge. Who doesn't know what electric charge is? We don't know what it is. We only know that it presents itself in two forms, positive and negative, by our definition. We are the ones who give the definition of positive and negative, right? Because that's human language. We are creating a language to understand what we observe in nature. We don't know what electric charge is, strictly speaking. We don't know what force is. What is force? Isn't it? It's an agent, it's something that acts. Force is expressed through changes in energy, right? We, for example, don't measure energy, but we measure changes in energy. You take a body, for example, you take a nice piece of metallic gold, put it at 40 degrees, and take another piece of gold that looks very similar, equal, and put it at 5 degrees, right? If you weigh them both on a scale, they'll have the same weight. But one is energetically hotter than the other. If you put them in contact, the one that cools down will get hotter, and the cold one will get hotter. They will have an intermediate temperature, because they will exchange energy. You measure this energy exchange, but you can't say how much energy the 40-degree one had, and how much energy the 5-degree one had. You only know how much was exchanged, because we measure energy differences because we don't yet know exactly what energy is. It's very difficult for us to conceive of electromagnetic radiation as an energetic form of light, or any wavelength, it doesn't matter, that travels in empty space. It's energy that is transported in empty space. So we don't understand this very clearly. So we have to formulate our ideas slowly, as we also understand the concepts of energy, matter, and spiritual principle. Very well. We will examine the properties of matter a little more. There in questions 29 to 34 from the Spirit's book, we have the following statement. In question 29, which we examined in the previous study of the Spirit's book, it is clarified that ponderability, that which has weight, can be evaluated and examined, is an essential attribute of matter as we understand it, but not of matter considered as universal fluid. This universal fluid is not ponderable for us. That is, it has no weight for us, cannot be evaluated, and cannot yet be examined. Now, this does not mean that the spirits cease to be the principle of your heavy matter. Chris, it's up to you. You see again, what an interesting thing he says is that it is the principle of heavy matter. So the universal fluid is closer to matter than to spirit. Because it is from the universal fluid that all the constitution of matter, from the most subtle to the most gross, will be constituted. And the important thing in questions 20 and 27 is that under the action of the mind or spirit, the universal fluid can associate itself in differentiated ways with other formations, already modifying the universal fluid itself. Like gross matter. So this is saying that you're taking a little more energy, which would be the universal fluid, and adding it to material things so that they change their properties. Right? So the principle, the universal cosmic fluid, is the foundation, the basic elementary principle from which everything material arises. That's why Kardec insists on differentiating the spiritual principle from the material principle. And the spirits say it's different, it's not the same thing. But we don't conceive of the spirit, right, without the material covering, in whatever stage it finds itself. But matter, for that very reason, has to be capable of being in the most quintessential form possible, the most subtle possible, even the grossest, to meet the needs of the most backward and the most advanced spirit. Exactly. Oh, Tassir, so within this question, right, of the properties of matter, in question 30, it raises this question. Is matter formed of one or only many? The element can be one or many elements. In your comments, you touched on this, right? Exactly. It's a change, right? A modification of the universal fluid. So, the universal fluid would be the fundamental element, matter or primitive energy. Today we can use the words matter and energy interchangeably, because we know that matter becomes energy, and energy becomes matter. So it's not very important. As long as we get rid of that old conception of matter, that matter is only what I feel, right? Electromagnetic energy is a form, in quotes, of matter, okay? Because it's pure energy, but it transforms into particles. So we can see that this transformation isn't clear. We don't understand the mechanism by which it occurs, because we see the input and output, but we don't see the reaction, right? So for us, the reaction isn't yet perceptible, but electromagnetic energy can become matter, particles, and particles can become energy again. Indeed, the atomic explosion itself represents the transformation of matter. In radiant energy, right? The atomic bomb is made in light of that. I mean, when you split a heavy atom and turn it into two light atoms, if you add the mass of the two light atoms and compare it to that of the original heavy atom, it's a little less. What's missing becomes energy. And how do you calculate that? By the formula, that amount of matter times the speed of light squared. Einstein's famous formula equals mc2, right? So we understand this, we already know a lot about this, but we don't know everything. We still have a lot to learn. Therefore, we have to understand that there is elementary matter. The spirits say that there is an element, and the modification of matter is a combination and modification of these elements, of this base element. Well, Jose Alberto, but matter has several properties, doesn't it? Where do these properties of matter originate from? Well, our dear Odicirio spoke of a series of causes that give different properties. Just the amplification of more or less energy. In a certain type of material cluster, a series of changes occur. But we also have other forms of energy. If you take the example of the water molecule H2O, if you separate the two molecules, you have hydrogen and oxygen separated. But if you put two molecules of oxygen together, something that was good to drink becomes an acid, hydrogen peroxide. So, external modifications, temperature, pressure, structure, the way the molecules and internal elements organize themselves in a given combination, give rise to the diverse material expressions we have. When we have the chemical elements, the periodic table of chemical elements, we see a number of distinct arrangements of the structure they present, giving examples of different elements, however, all of them originating from a basic initial element that we are informed about. So, the properties come from the temperature, pressure, structure, internal structure with which the atoms organize themselves, the molecules organize themselves, each time they take on a certain form. Unlike other things, they take on different properties, they generate different circumstances for themselves, right?
Very good. Before we move on to the next understanding, because I want to focus on what Jose Alberto just commented on and pose a question to Otaciro, but there are two very interesting comments. Amanda Ribeiro says here in the chat, science proving the veracity of the Book of Spirits. And that's exactly it, right? It's the scientific aspect of our beloved Spiritist doctrine. And Eugenia Canto, our companion speaker facilitator here on the program, is adding a historical reminder. We thank the historian Duke Luig Bogle for wave mechanics. So we also pay him our respects at this moment. But based on what Jose Alberto told us, Taciro, Does that mean that the flavors, odors, colors, sound, poisonous, or salutary qualities of an element are modifications of a single primitive substance? Is that it? And we return to the cosmic fluid, universal.
Yes, that's an interesting question. In Kardec's time and today, we understand this very clearly. Our perception, our senses, for example, taste, smell, color, are impressions of our senses when we experience a contact with that object that will cause us that sensation. For example, you arrive at a place that has plants, and you smell lemon. Then you walk a little and smell orange. Then you think, how do you smell this odor? It's because the plant exhales molecules that are volatile, that volatilize, turn into vapor, become molecules released into the air, and these molecules enter our nose through the air process. Our nose has molecules and cells with sensors in their membranes that receive these molecules, identify their structure, the molecular structure itself, and transform this identification of the structure into smell, into odor. And it's curious because the structure of matter is fundamental. The structure of the molecule is fundamental to giving the odor. So the same molecule that gives the smell of lemon, it's the same molecule that gives oranges their smell, but it's an isomer. What is an isomer? It's a molecule that has the same molecular constitution, with the same atoms, but a different structure. That sounds complicated, but it's not. You see my two hands that I'm trying to show you, right? My hands aren't the same. One is the reflection of the other. If we put them in front of each other like this, one is the reflection of the other. I can make my hand coincide. But the correct way would be to coincide like this, so they don't coincide. If you put your hand in a mirror, you'll see the other hand. That is, my left hand is the mirror image of my right hand. So, my hand is a molecule that has the same constitution, the same 5 fingers, but it's arranged in a different structure. It's called an optical isomer. So there are molecules that are like that. For example, limonene is a structured molecule that has a CH3, a ring, a hydrogen, a CH2, a CH3. If it has the isomer, left hand gives off a lemon scent. If you have the isomer, right hand gives off an orange scent. So this is a property of structural modification of matter. So these sensations come because of the molecular structure of the material things that we perceive. The same thing is color. We have it in our eyes, right? Our cells in our retina. When it receives an orange photon, it causes a change in a molecule that is sensitive to the absorption of this yellow photon. It modifies the structure, and there is a sensor in the membrane of our eye, in this retina, that identifies it and gives information of red or blue. Each one has a color, right? So our sensations are molecular interactions with our body and carried to our spiritual perceptive structure. How does it work from the body to the spirit? We don't know yet. But then the properties of matter come because of the molecular structure, the atomic structure of matter. Basically, Jose Alberto, according to what Tassiro is saying, and this is in question 35 of the Spirits book, Kardec asks, do molecules have a determined shape? Well, that's a question Kardec asked, because the structure, the measurement of structure through X-ray diffraction, didn't yet exist. X-rays weren't yet known. They were discovered at the end of Kardec's century, and later explored to understand the structure of crystals, the organization of matter in crystalline form, and this allowed us to determine that molecules have structure, and a well-defined structure. But these structures aren't rigid. Because molecules have movement, they are dynamic, right? In any case, nothing is still. Everything vibrates in the universe, and molecules oscillate as well. So they have a form, but they dance their form around degrees of freedom of movement that they possess. When you give a lot of energy to a molecule, it agitates very rapidly. That's why it gets hot, because it increases the kinetic energy of the molecule's movement. The temperature, the sensation of temperature, is a sensation of very intense movement. So when we remove energy from it, it becomes less vibrant until it's almost rigid, but it never becomes completely rigid. Quantum physics guarantees that even at absolute zero temperature, molecules have small vibrations. So that's right. Molecules have structure, and in Kardec's time we didn't know this very well, but the spirits answer correctly. Do you want to see? It's question number 34, and this was number 35. No, 35 is universal space. It's 34A, right? Look here at Kardec's question. Do molecules have a determined form? Certainly molecules have a form, but I wasn't able to appreciate it at that time. Today we are. Tassiro, I want to highlight a phrase you said there to create a hook for a comment I found very cool from Rafael Borges here in our chat. Everything vibrates in the universe. And Rafael says the following. I'll even ask Jose to comment, and then Carlos continues with question 35, right? Rafael B., he comments the following. If the spirit acts on matter, then it is possible to say that the mind is the creative source of our planet. Is that correct, Jose? Well, there's no doubt that this is the basic foundation of creation, not only of our planet, but in all the mansions of the Father's house. That is, we organize, create, and build. And so it must be in the spiritual world through forces that act directly on matter, the force of thought acting on matter, certainly a matter more susceptible to this action. In the case of the physical world, we also use the mind, creating our ideas, and our ideas gradually structure themselves, expressing themselves in material life according to the model, the form that we conceive in our minds. No, there is no doubt about this source of creation around us, in the spiritual world and in the material world, as a result of our actions as free spirits, as spirits that build from our mental action. Very well. There is a comment from João Tadeu Costa. We are seeking understanding, where there are still several gaps and obstacles that are within the essence of God, far beyond our possibilities of perception. That's what Tassiro has been highlighting on several occasions, and Jose Alberto too, right? So it wouldn't be reasonable to stick to the guiding principles given by the superior spirits, considering the ignorant range of those on this side. So look, João Tadeu, our effort is always one of self-improvement, isn't it? Not limiting ourselves, really seeking to understand everything. We won't understand everything yet. I remember when I first read the Spirit's book, around 14 or 15 years old. I probably didn't understand everything I understood there, maybe 5%, but we keep trying, we keep reading, we keep searching, we listen to the comments like we're hearing now, and we keep going deeper. There's a comment, look, from Annalicia Santana. Well, she puts it like this. Wait a minute. Folks, this study should be shown in prime time on the best channels. She says she's loving it. And back here, Ana Beatriz Amaral, I've never studied the Spirit's book with such depth. Gratitude to all of you for the deep dive we're doing. It feels like I'm studying it for the first time. It's always like that. When we start to delve deeper, it's as if we're reading it for the first time, because there's so much, and with all certainty, with all the effort of Tassiro, Jose Alberto, our research efforts, we are by no means exhausting it. If we return to these questions, there will be angles here that we will delve into further, especially following the advancement of science. As Tassiro highlighted a moment ago, Kardec asked this question because there was no way to measure, to track. There weren't the instruments we have today. So, our thanks to you all. Let's continue delving deeper, and we would now move on. If you agree, I don't know if Tassiro and Jose Alberto still have some comments, but we would move on to questions 35 and 36, not that it's about universal space. Let's see some comments. I think you're commenting on something, so let's go. If Jose is perfect. Oh, Carlos, I have the impression that one question passed, apparently. Perhaps it did, which is question 28. When the spirits answer Kardec apparently with a certain weariness, because Kardec asks him, since the spirit is in itself something, wouldn't it be more accurate and less subject to confusion to give the 12 general elements the designations of inert matter, intelligent matter? Well, Kardec is trying to reiterate, trying to extract as much as possible, and the spirits respond apparently in a way that's a bit like, look, words don't matter much to us. It's up to you to formulate your language in a way that allows you to understand each other. Your controversies almost always stem from not understanding each other about terms you've used, because your language is too complete to express what doesn't offend your senses. So why am I bringing this up? Because the spirits stopped talking about spirit and matter and said, look, there's another aspect of your evolutionary civilizational process that also needs to move forward for you to understand these others, which is language, which is the construction of the manner, cognitive aspects of how you examine things. And he says, in a very interesting way, that it is necessary to have unity in the concepts you employ, because your language is incomplete to express what does not reach the voice through the senses, through sight, through the eye, through that which escapes that. We have incompetence, we have incomplete language to express. How to express something that we conceive only through thought? We do not yet have these models of interaction. Then the spirits make a parenthesis in the discussion about the spiritual material principle to say, look, there is another important element to know in the process of knowledge, which is language and the technologies that will allow you to reach this. So, that was my comment. Ottocino also has a comment, right, Carlos? Ottocino was raising his little finger. I'm going to ask you, Ottocino, to answer Anna Lydia Tahammer, a dear deaf friend, in your comment, and she has a question. Is it possible for our bodies to have several tissues, and not just one? Okay, comment for us. The first thing I wanted to say to our colleague who complained a bit about the difficulty is that our learning is dialectical. What does that mean? It means that to learn something, you first have to learn its foundation. When you learn its foundation, you learn something more sophisticated. Combining this more sophisticated thing with the foundation, you are now able to think further ahead. So it's a process of going back and forth, taking steps forward. The dialectical process says the following: the more you know, the more you learn. So we can't be afraid to have doubts. When we study something, it doesn't mean you'll have a clear understanding. That's it. But the initial idea will remain. When you study it again, you'll see the points you didn't see before. If you wait a little longer to ruminate on those ideas and form your own concept, when you read it again, you'll have a more advanced view of it. So, we can't be mentally lazy. We have to have the courage to face the difficulties of learning. I, as a teacher, having taught for over 37 years of my life, know that to teach, you have to study and learn very well, because you can't teach incorrectly. We come to the conclusion that learning, the work of learning, is the most difficult work that exists. Building a house is easier. Ahohiopolovelli. It's important for us to understand this. Therefore, when the Spirit of Truth says in the Gospel, "Spirit, love one another and instruct yourselves," He is giving us the two keys to our evolution. To instruct is to study, to learn, to think about things, to meditate on them, and to move forward. So here we have to understand, for our companion, who asked what we are calling matter, right? Matter for us in the physical world is all constituted by substances that are formed with atoms that are already well described in the periodic table of chemical elements. That, for us, is matter, because we are sensory beings. Matter for us is made of, isn't it, the atomic structure of matter associated with the bonding energies that are used to keep these molecules, this matter, cohesive. So our body is made of all kinds of atoms. We have all types of atoms in our body, and we have them in various forms: solid form like in bone, liquid form like in fluids, pasty form like in meat, in muscle parts, right? So we have in our body the structuring of matter in many different ways, but our body is essentially made up of atoms. When we die, this body breaks down into simpler molecular elements. If we, for example, cremate the body, it will turn to ash. It's all coal. Most of the molecules will volatilize, right? So we return these atoms to nature. But we, as the spiritual reality, are constituted of a more subtle matter, a spiritual body made of cosmic fluid, which is our paraspiritual body. So we go to the spiritual world with this body and continue the life process. So of course, if you think about the human being, we are constituted of three things: the spirit itself, the paraspiritual body, and the physical body. The physical body is made of gross matter, the paraspiritual body of subtle matter, and the spirit is the most intimate concept, which we don't know what it is, of the psycho-emotional field. Very well. Now, Mauricio, let's consider that what you asked has already been answered. Wouldn't it be easier to consider the principle of creation acting on the whole? But that's what's happening, isn't it? Everything we're discussing here deals with that. And Mauricio, he Yes, there's one thing that's important for us to understand, which is the following: how God made us in His image and likeness, and as God creates, we co-create. That is, we are capable, through our intelligence, which is the divine image within us, of manipulating the elements of creation and creating, shaping, and formatting what we desire. Therefore, we are co-creators with God. And then Mauricio comments, he asks, universal fluid, spirit, and matter, do they follow the same principle as the electron, proton, and neutron? In other words, the principle of creation isn't exactly this order of things, is it? Could you comment a little, Jose Alberto, Tassel, very quickly, please? In our first study, we talked about the hypotheses that, particularly in my view, we have among the subatomic particles, the ferms and the bosons, right? Well, the particles constituting what we could call the particles of matter themselves, the bosons, to give a certain intelligibility, to keep them organized, to give them a certain dynamism. And these are expressions of what we are talking about, we don't know yet. Also because we have materials that our current technological resources do not allow us to examine, as we refer to here, dark matter, which constitutes the largest part of the universe. This matter that we are talking about, these 4.9%, and they represent only that, the minimum part of the universe of what constitutes it. That is, all the stars, all the cosmic dust, all the planets, everything, all the physical bodies, all the trees, everything that exists in the world, in the universe. This represents only around 5% of everything that should exist in the universe in light of what science knows today. And it calls these other realities dark energy and dark matter. Because in the case of dark matter energy, it's known to exist because it exerts a gravitational pull on nearby stars, etc., but we don't know what it's like because it doesn't reflect light. And dark energy, it's known to exist because it produces an expansion process in the universe for which no identified source is known. These are therefore concrete realities that we don't yet know how to give an opinion on. We are getting to the bottom of it, to its characterizations. I just read that we are beginning to see the transit between a particle and an antiparticle. We are beginning to see the jump of an electron from one orbit to another, generating a photon, and so on. But all this is still only from baryonic matter, from this matter that we can examine, right? To zero, quickly. Okay? Okay. So let's go to 35. We will return to this subject of spirits later, won't we? From question 76 of the Spirits book. We are talking about some prerequisites, which are in the questions that follow, so we can better understand what the spirit is as an individuality. We are saying that it is progressive, it is one, it is challenging, but it is progressive. So we will continue here from 35-36, asking Jose Alberto, is universal space infinite or is it limited? Well, the best answer was the one the spirits gave to Kardec. Infinite supposes that what exists beyond where there is no more space, right? And the spirits continue saying this, it confuses reason, and in fact confuses us. Well or badly, however, reason tells you that it cannot be otherwise. The same applies to infinity in all things. It is not in the tiny sphere you inhabit that you will be able to comprehend it. So why am I reading this? Well, I'm saying, look, space, the way you conceive it today, we are talking about the end of the 19th century. We didn't yet have the later concept of space, or of the curvatures of space, with the law of relativity, general relativity, proposed later by Arns at the beginning of the 20th century, which revolutionized the understanding of space, right? Talking about space as a curvature produced by the gravity of large bodies, etc. Currently, we even talk about investigating particles of space, right? So he was referring to this conception that we had at the time. And it doesn't say it's not from this tiny sphere where you will find yourselves that you will be able to understand this question of the infinity of space. All our knowledge, even if we could define everything about space, we would only reach the Big Bang. Nothing more before it, no. Even if we have theories of multiverses and so many other possibilities, but our current cognitive understanding, in this current state of knowledge, only leads us to this definition. It can't be any other way. Think that there is a limit to this. What exists beyond? The reason confuses us is that we lack the language, the words the Spirit spoke of long ago, to define and understand these concepts. Very good. And considering this limitation of ours to zero, I'd like you to comment further on this question of space. What definition can we have of space? It's a difficult concept, as difficult as time. Time and space are two very complex concepts. We have an idea of what it is, because we have a perception of space. Because when we're talking about physical space around us, we have a very clear idea. When we think from a universal point of view, what is space, right? So this concept of space is a complicated one. In science, we believe that space is infinite, it's limitless. That is, you can imagine as much as you want, right? But you won't reach the end of it, right? No matter how far you go, there's still infinite space ahead. So this idea of infinity of space is very complex in our minds because we have a limited capacity. How can the finite think about the infinite, right? That's our difficulty. While in the physical body, we don't perceive things with much breadth because the body limits the spirit. So we can define space as everything we observe around us, right? But it's much more than that. In science, in cosmology, space is conceived as infinite space. In fact, the expansion of the universe, as the universe expands, creates space, because the expansion of the universe creates space and creates time. That's the model of the universe we have. The Big Bang started at a point, right? An infinitely energetic point that begins to expand. As it expands, it creates space and time. And as it continues to expand, it creates more space and more time. Okay, look, to give you an idea of this, you take one of those little birthday balloons, and you draw, for example, Mickey Mouse on it, right? Since we already find balloons with Mickey Mouse drawn on them, as you blow on the balloon, it inflates, the Mickey Mouse gets bigger and bigger, it grows, doesn't it? So you're creating space, right? As you blow, you create space. So the expansion of the universe gives this idea. As space, the universe expands, it creates space, but it is finite in time. Our universe, for us, for our observation, is finite in time. This is interesting, isn't it? Because we've already discovered this through a law of the universe's expansion, called Hubble's law, the same Hubble who gave his name to our orbiting observatory, who was an astronomer who, studying galaxies, observed that galaxies move away from us, and, the farther away they are, the faster they move away. And the speed at which they move away from us is proportional to the distance. This means that if you make a graph where you put the speed on the y-axis and the distance on the x-axis, all the galaxies fall along a straight line. Right? The more distant ones have a higher speed, the less distant ones have a lower speed. Then, if you do a thought experiment of reversing time, they will return to the more distant ones. The more distant ones will approach with a higher speed, and the closer ones with a lower speed. And they will all arrive together at the same point, right? And if we measure the time for this to happen, it's 3.7 billion years. Which is the time of the Big Bang, the great explosion, the great inflationary process of the universe, right? But that's what we observe. Could there be other universes like ours? Yes, because we cannot conceive of God being idle at any instant. Therefore, it is possible that thousands of universes exist, and we are only observing our own. Then it is said, science admits the hypothesis. The hypothesis isn't reality yet. The hypothesis of pluriverses, multiverses, hasn't been proven, right? So this whole concept is very complicated. Do you know why we know that time is finite? Because if it weren't finite, you'd have to imagine that the universe, space, right, has no end and is full of stars. Now, if we have a lot of stars emitting light towards us, if you add up the light from all the stars, and there are infinitely many stars, even a sum of small things, infinitely many times, equals something. So our universe couldn't be dark. It would have to be luminous. Right? And it isn't, so that means it's limited. Right? That's a cosmological scientific concept. Very good. A topic for us to continue thinking about, isn't it, Jose Alberto? Does absolute vacuum exist in some part of universal space? Not only did the spirits answer no, that it doesn't exist, but that it would be inconceivable. In our present day, with this concept, with this idea of dark energy and dark matter, science presents us with the idea of non-existence, of the absence of a space, of a circumstance where nothing exists. So, the universe as we know it, even with its edges of 13.7 billion years, which is the time, let's say, calculated for, from the moment of its initial conception, that it has been expanding, etc., the expectation was that at a certain point it would stop and begin to regress to the initial point. But then it turned out that it continues moving faster. That's why it was concluded that there must be an energy spread throughout the universe that pushes galaxies and stars further away. The same thing with cosmic matter, in regions where complete non-existence was supposed, because certain stars and galaxies were not perceived there. So there is no dark energy here. Suddenly, you'll start to realize that cosmological observations, which did exist, also revealed the type of stars, the type of astronomical object, that wasn't susceptible to the equipment used. So, as science advances, especially in the field of cosmology, it becomes clear that the universe is indeed filled with structures that we are only now beginning to grasp, both on a macro and micro level. The more we delve into the intimacy of matter, the more we realize that nothingness doesn't exist, right? And that's why we emphatically say, the spiritual world exists, right? As Chameleon, the 19th century astronomer, unfortunately very little read, already said, testing this, right? Assisting Kardec, even living with him and giving us all this information. Look, we're already ahead of schedule, right, Carlos? Well, before posing the last question to Tassiro, I'd like to read the comments from two dear friends who are part of the FIB study area, USA, saying that the quality of the theory is getting better and better. And to dear Otasiro, our compliments on the didactic precision of the comments. The same, which also clearly refers to Jose Alberto and the whole range of knowledge he provides us. So thank you, Uzi, for your support. Now Claudia deigns, Otasiro, perhaps considering this last question, she says she begins to understand all the explanations that have been given here. She asks, can I say that the expansion of space is proportional to the evolution of the spirit? It's difficult to answer that question because it's a conjecture, isn't it? We know that the expansion of space, I like to think about it, right? As a physicist, I like to make models for myself, to be able to understand things more clearly. So I try to think that the law of evolution has a rhythm, a path, right? It starts from an initial point and progresses to the intelligent principle, which starts from a point of principle and reaches an angelic state. Our universe has a path to follow. Our time moves in a certain direction. So I associate this with God. God is a source. Look, a source gushes forth. It doesn't stop gushing. So everything is being propelled, expanding, growing, creating, appearing, because God is the source, and appearing intelligently, because He is the supreme intelligence of the universe, isn't He? So I prefer to say that the expansion in the universe is associated with divine creation, because God doesn't stop creating. Obviously, we, as spirits that are evolving, participate in this process, because we are not finished products either. We begin, we have a beginning, a middle, and we have a purpose. It's not an end, we have a purpose, because we are immortal spirits. So, His purpose is to attain angelhood, a full understanding of the universe, full communion with God like Jesus, and to co-participate in creation by organizing new planetary systems, new galaxies, new star clusters. In short, tasks that angelic spirits perform. We will also accomplish this one day. One day I will be a planetary director like Jesus is. And if you want to participate with me, I will be very happy, because that is how divine creation is. It is an immense joy to be able to participate in divine creation. So everything expands, everything grows, everything moves, everything progresses, because God creates for a greater purpose. Very well, we have reached the end of our meeting today. As you can see, there is much more for us to explore in depth. There are several questions you have asked. Rest assured and follow the answers on our website. Those questions that we were unable to answer during our study, we inform you that Otaciro and Eugenia are part of the team that answers these questions. So you will see, in writing, their answers to these questions that remained unanswered. It is a great satisfaction for us to be able to study together, to delve deeper into these concepts little by little, and there is much more. Soon, when we reach the philosophical aspect of the Spiritist doctrine, there is so much for us to discuss, examine, and understand. For now we will understand, according to Tassiro's last words, that we are heirs of the universe, children of God. All of us are heirs of the universe, and we will understand this universe someday with patience and perseverance. We cannot become complacent, but we cannot be in too much of a hurry. So let's walk together, right? As proposed, because we will get there little by little. A great satisfaction. Have an excellent week. And see you all on Monday. Thank you, Otaciro, Jose Alberto, and our interpreters. Thank you very much. And Christian, our warm embrace, and to you who have been following us, our virtual embrace and our wishes for much peace throughout the week. All the best, everyone. Studying the Spirit's Book, a sequential study of Allan Kardec's work, is our way of transmitting hope, knowledge, and joy. Taking this opportunity to express my gratitude, I ask that you continue to participate, collaborating as much as possible, so that this proposal of love and peace continues to celebrate life for many more years, because the world's needs are merciless and growing, and we, who live for good, cannot remain idle, still, and contemplating. Thinking that God will do what we need to do. My gratitude, my embrace, and my warm invitation to continue together with FEB TV on the air, shining light. Get to know the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, which seeks to show who it is, the work carried out through this centennial institution, bringing you into our home. How did the Brazilian Spiritist Federation come about, from Augusto Elias, its founder, to the present day? What happened? Who were and who are the figures who were and are part of this history? What is the connection between names like Chico Xavier, Desira de Menezes, and Ivone Pereira with this institution, its mission, and how it contributes to the formation of good people? We will present the Brazilian Spiritist Federation in a dynamic format with videos, testimonials, historical posts, and audio files. Get to know it and become part of this family.